Hello! Hello everyone! Today we will continue to look at a topic in HCIA-Storage. Previously we have introduced the control enclosure and the disk enclosure. Next, let's take a look at the main function of the interconnection module. First, let's take a look at the interconnection module. Its basic appearance looks like this. This is a 2U SAS module. It's an interconnection module within a 2U disk enclosure. Here is the interconnection module in a 2U disk enclosure. These are two different types of interconnection modules. Their appearances are different. You see, this one is SAS and this one is as well. Please pay attention to this style here. Well, here the main application scenario has actually been introduced before. If you are using it, we mainly use it for storage, backup, and archiving because it is relatively low cost and flexible in terms of expansion. If you are using it, what is it mainly for? It is primarily for scenarios with high read and write demands, such as real-time databases and AI learning or AI training. It mainly supports all-flash storage, so its speed is relatively faster. This is the main difference in their application scenarios. Here, each node module is essentially what? They are all controlled through node ports. Or in other words, they enable communication between our control enclosure and a storage enclosure. It acts as a connection point for data transmission between the control enclosure and the disk enclosure. This is the main function of our node module. Next, let's take a closer look. Let's take a look at this. Switch. Why are we talking about switches now? Because in our current storage network, what is quite important? It's actually the network. Between different servers, communication is primarily conducted through the network, so here we mainly use two different types of switches. If we are in a normal Ethernet environment, generally we use CE switches more often. We will introduce another type later. The CE switch is mainly used in Ethernet environments, and it has 48 ports. These are the interfaces with four 60G optical ports. Its main advantage is that it can achieve a lossless Ethernet storage network, which is particularly suitable for cloud computing and our distributed storage. These are the two main functions. For example, according to our Huawei CE6800 switch, it supports AI. Moreover, after being used by a certain video platform, the network latency was reduced from milliseconds to microseconds. When it comes to our storage, it's not just about storage servers. This is something everyone should pay attention to. As we mentioned earlier, whether we are introducing the control frame, the hard disk frame, or the modular units, regardless of which one we introduce, they primarily belong to the category of servers, specifically focusing on storage servers. As for other intermediate nodes, we also need to pay attention to them. For example, switches in our storage network actually serve as a kind of transportation hub. Here, everyone must pay attention to this. Different switches actually have some differences in their usage. This is something to be aware of. This is the CE6800. Hey, our CE little buddy. And there's another type of switch that is generally used in dedicated network environments. We have FC switches. This type of switch is equipped with 24 FC ports supporting 8G or 16G and also 32G speeds. Its latency is very low, extremely low. As for the CE switch we mentioned earlier, its latency is at the microsecond level. This actually just reduces latency from milliseconds to microseconds, whereas our FC switch has even lower latency than the previous switch, reaching the nanosecond level. It is mainly suitable for traditional SAN networks, such as financial core trading systems, etc. What does it compare to? It compares to those that require low latency and fast response speed, making it suitable for such scenarios. The main point here is actually because of our storage. Our server is primarily for storage, right? The read efficiency is also related to our hard drive, right? The read efficiency of the hard drive. Different hard drives have different efficiencies, so there will inevitably be some differences, but ultimately, regardless of whether it's a server or a hard drive, ultimately, even if your read speed is very fast, when you need to reach the client, you must go through something in between, right? Through the network cable, right? First, from your server, the first step is definitely through the network cable, and then the second step is connecting to the switch. Then it goes to other networks or other network segment environments. There are several steps like this. So the switch is actually a very important node in our storage process. It's similar to the role of our mechanical module, which mainly serves as. What does it belong to? It belongs to an intermediate connecting node, and our switch is actually the same. Here, whether it's our FC switch or CE switch, their main role is to provide us with, well, the ability to connect two different environments more quickly. What does this mean? It means connecting the two ends of the environment more rapidly to achieve faster access efficiency and speed. Data access. As for the FC switch, it is relatively. The cost is relatively higher. It requires some dedicated HBA cards, which are more suitable for, well, more suitable for this kind of. It's something we need. In environments that require low latency and high efficiency, these are our two types of switches. And there's one more thing I mentioned earlier, which is the network cable, or what else? Our hard drive cable. To be precise, it's the hard drive cable. The network cable is mainly used to connect with our switch. And another point is that this is the device cable you see now. This cable is used to connect the device, connecting the system window of the device to our terminal. There are many types of these cables here. As you can see, there are so many types in total. There are serial cables and Midas cables, and over here are electrical cables. Please note the difference between these two. This one is an electrical cable, and this one is an optical cable. Then over here there are also differences, like cables with different speeds. You can take a look at them first. The last one is an optical fiber, a rather special type of optical fiber, ITcertification. Actually, the different cables here are mainly targeted at different scenarios, and there will be some distinctions in the scenarios they are intended for. Here, with different types of cables, for example. Whoa. What do we use serial cables for? They are used to connect devices, connecting the system port of the device to our maintenance terminal, mainly for maintenance purposes. Serial cables are generally used for maintenance. And then, like our mini SAS cables, including optical cables, their main function is to be used in storage systems. They are used to connect our node ports, and then connect the control enclosure to the disk enclosure, serving as an intermediary connection. This is our mini cable and optical cable. Then, moving further down, we have our 100G and 25G, two different types. A type of cable. These two types of cables are mainly used for direct multi-space networking, or connecting smart hard drive enclosures, with the primary function of the 25G cable being to connect the front-end host network and host networking. Their main functions are somewhat different, including the final fiber optic. Fiber optics, here everyone surely has some understanding of it. Fiber optics actually have some differences compared to our traditional cables. Here, if we need to use fiber optics, we also need a switch that supports fiber optics. This is a switch for fiber optic connections. It mainly connects one end to the HBA card in the FC switch we mentioned earlier to connect to our fiber optic switch or storage. Here, its efficiency and speed are actually very high. However, the cost for this is relatively higher, and it requires a compatible switch to be used. This is one of our various types of equipment cables, so you need to understand this. Don't be unsure about where to plug it in when you see it. That definitely won't work. Here, you need to distinguish between them, as each type of cable has a different function. In this case, there is basically not much competition among these types. Essentially, it's just that fiber optics have different speeds, and previously each had its own function. This is the content regarding our equipment cables. The main content of this lesson is primarily about the connection method between our hard drive enclosure and the control enclosure. Alright, if anyone wants to learn Huawei certification technology, or wants to obtain the Huawei certification question bank, please send me a private message. You can also leave a comment below the video for technical exchanges. Okay, let's stop here for today.